Hello and welcome back to the fourth and final part of What If a Billionaire Invested in Turkey. We've gone 12 years into the future since last time. I just left it on for a few hours to sort of simulate, and it's gone 12 years in the future. So there's a lot of things to look at, a lot of things to analyse. First of all though, we need to look at the national team, and you can see here, world ranking currently 10th, which is pretty cool I think. Now let's have a look at the world rankings then. They've literally been, that's the highest they've been for a long time. Really reaching the zenith in the past few years. Went up to 5th actually at one point in world rankings. They must have done something really well, but in the early 2030s they weren't particularly good, down 60th, but they just had a rise throughout the whole decade until this point now where they're sitting 10th, but we're sitting as high as 5th. So I think there's been a pretty good progression for the Turkish national team. Let's look at how they've done in recent years. So 2042 World Cup got to the quarterfinals, but lost to the Dutch on penalties, which is a bit unfortunate. Always the worst way to go at penalties, things like that. Had an unbeaten year in 41, got to the European Championships quarterfinal, losing to Germany 2-0. They have some pretty decent years actually, looking fairly unbeaten. World Cup quarterfinal again in 38, losing to Portugal that time. And basically, apart from 36 season, which is they seem to lose a few games in this one, they've been pretty much unbeaten in a lot of these games, in a lot of years, for example. So I think that's pretty good going. That's probably why they've been so good and worked themselves so high. Second round of the 2034 World Cup against Brazil. 2033 is when they were at their lowest. So I'm not quite sure why they were so low down at this point, because they look quite good unless it's this year. It was the 2032 year that did it for them, basically. That was a very poor year. Won everything apart from one game in 2031, and same situation in 2030. So pretty good stuff for Turkey, I've got to say. The best player in the Turkish side then is Furkan. 169 current ability, 170 potential. He's 27 though, so he's not going to get that 170, but he's basically reached it actually. That's a fantastic going for him. So obviously he must be a very good player. Omar Terzi, 25 years old, 168, 174 potential. He may creep up one or two little bits of current ability, but I don't think he's going to increase that much at all. But it looks like a decent player. Valued at 66 million, playing for Barcelona. So is Sergin Yazidze, goalkeeper for Barcelona, 166 current ability, 180 potential, but at 34 years old, obviously isn't going to get there and things like that. And there's a few decent players in this side actually. They look pretty decent in terms of potential. He's got the best. It's the guys we've spoken about. The guys we haven't spoken about here, Ali Aden. He's got 135 current ability, but 171 potential. Only 19 years old. He possibly could reach that playing for Bursaspor at the moment. So he's a player to watch out for in the future. Right, looking at the Turkish Super League then, we can see that it's actually just dropped just ever so slightly to 7th in the competition rankings. It was as high as 6th at one point. If we have a quick look at the coefficients and things like that, how far off the Portuguese leagues are they? They're only 3 coefficient points off Portugal, so they're not that far behind, but they are quite a bit behind Germany and France, and actually they're quite far ahead of Holland, Ukraine, Belgium, for example. If we look here, I think they were as high as 5th at one point though, because if you look at here, in the 37-38 season, you can see here we've got a 13.4. The Portugal is 10.7, so we must have been ahead of Portugal then, and France only had 13.0, so they must have been ahead of France at that point as well. So I think the Turkish leagues could have been as high as 5th at one point, but don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously we've got a lot of years to look through, so we'll quickly look at the past winners rather than the whole table, because I think this sort of tells a story of things. So looking at these past winners then, I think Besiktas have done maybe the best. They're doing pretty well, at least to start the 2030s they were doing pretty well. They won 5 other titles in the 2030s, which is pretty good going for them, to be fair. Fenerbahce and Galatasaray also win a few. Galatasaray being a bit down actually. They've not won as many as they did in the mid 2020s. They did pretty well then obviously, but only won the 2 titles there in 2034 and 2042. Fenerbahce, they're also winning 5 titles as well, but they sort of come more towards the end of that decade, so that's pretty good as going. But only those 3 teams to win titles there, and to be fair, mostly it's those teams finishing second as well. Başakşehir coming in second and third once or twice as well. Bursaspor also coming third there as well, but it's just these 3 teams that are basically dominating Turkish football right now. In the first division then, we can sort of see a similar sort of scenario that we've talked about a lot before, just teams promoted and then going down again. They're just bouncing up and down, and to be fair, if you look at this team, which has got so many accents on it, I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, so we're going to call them Gen. I think they've shown that they're bouncing up and down, promoted, relegated, promoted, relegated, promoted. So they're going up and down, up and down. They're too good for the first division, but not good enough for the Super League. So they've had a decent run there. Obviously, they're doing all right for themselves. They've been bouncing for a long time, not an awful long time, but in the past decade or so, they have been bouncing nearly every single season. In the second division white group then, sort of a very similar story we've just spoken about actually, teams bouncing up and down. This time it's Galatasaray, FK, they're bouncing up and down, up and down, up and down. Ulti as well, they're bouncing up and down in the past few seasons. We saw them do that quite a bit in the 2020s and things like that, so they've started to do that again. It's also a lot of the same teams finishing second and third as well, but not being able to win the playoffs and things like that. It's a bit unfortunate for them. Obviously the playoff system, I think it's quite good to be fair. I quite like this playoff system, but for a lot of these teams, they just seem to can't get out of the division. They seem to come runners up or third place all the time. For example, Ranierspor, I think is perhaps how you say that. They seem to have done that a little bit in recent seasons. So that's just one of the examples. And if we look down at the red group as well, very, very similar story with some of these teams as well. You can see a few teams bouncing up and down and quite a few teams finishing second and third at the same time and not being able to go in the playoffs and just having to stay in the division for a long time. So teams trapped in these lower divisions, perhaps there needs to be more ways for them to get promoted. Perhaps that would be an improvement to Turkish football, for example. But obviously I'm not the league organiser, so I can't really say what's best. Right, going back to the 2030-31 season, then we're going to be looking for some mega transfers in the Super League, not the First Division, sorry. And this one, junior cleaner from Benfica to Fenerbahce, 38.5 million and 37 million spent on another guy coming from Barcelona. So they must be decent players. Are they still playing? Are they still at Fenerbahce? He's retired, only just though, I think. And then Junior has still playing, but he's playing in China. Did he have a decent career at Fenerbahce? Stayed there for quite a while, but never had fantastic average ratings. Always played much better in China. So maybe he wasn't quite worth the money, but they sold him for more than they bought him for, so that's something at least. Season afterwards, Fenerbahce once again spending huge sums of money, 34 rises to 48 million and 44 million there for these two players. Andreas Rosa from PSV is still at Fenerbahce, so obviously he decided to stay there for quite a long time. Went on loan at Başakşehir actually for a little while, but has played incredibly well at Fenerbahce. Look at those average ratings. His lowest one there is a 7.18, and that was in his early career at Fenerbahce. Since then, he's been fantastic. Shinakawa from Benfica is now at Arsenal. Didn't have quite as long a career at Benfica, but they sold him for less than they bought him for, but not a huge loss. He didn't play all that well. He obviously was very good still, but wasn't quite as good as a guy we just looked at. He's played much better for Man City, I think, and he's been alright at Arsenal, I think. The most expensive transfer from the 32-33 season, the player leaving with 36 million, and Besiktas being the biggest importer this time with 31.5. Season afterwards, 57 million. Fenerbahce playing for another player from Portugal, this time from Porto. Ransel comes in there. What is he? He's a striker. He's not there anymore. He's at Frankfurt now, but had an alright career, to be fair. Considering he's a striker and they paid 57 million for him, those goal returns aren't really that great, but his average rating does suggest he played very well, so maybe he wasn't the main scoring outlet. Perhaps he was more there to just try and set things up and be a bit more of a playmaker. Season after, we see a big transfer coming from Bordeaux to Fenerbahce, 43.5 million. Now, Bordeaux seem to have sold a lot of players to Turkish teams for a lot of money. I think they made a lot of money off these Turkish giants, for example. Sami Ben Salam comes into Fenerbahce. He's now at Manchester United, valued at 69 million, so he must be a decent player. And in fact, he only stayed the one season, left for next season for more money than they paid for him. So at least they made money off him, but has had a very decent career at Man United. So let's see if he was the biggest transfer of the season. Afterwards he was, so that was a big transfer leaving, and Varol Kavak comes into Fenerbahce for 25 million. Materzi, that we spoke about earlier, left Başakşehir for Man United. He's obviously the good player in the national side, but plays for Man United for a little while. For 40 million he moved to. Dylan Juan joins Fenerbahce once again. Fenerbahce just spending so much money in recent years, and a lot of these players, 26 million, 22.5 million. 37-38 season, West Ham sell a player to Galatasaray for 45 million. Kawasaki, is he any good? He's now a scout actually, but if we look at his career stats, I don't think he was worth that money, really, if you look at him there. He never had a fantastic year, apart from this year at Fenerbahce when he only played 5 games and did very well, but he had a good year at West Ham there. But the other seasons, apart from his first season with Galatasaray, he's not been fantastic, I'd say. After 3 seasons, spending 45 million on him, they let him go on a free to Copenhagen. So I think that's probably quite a big waste of money there, I think. They spend huge money again the next season, though, 38-39. 47.5 million on Charles Stevenson from Southampton. Is he still there? He's not. Is it Los Gliel now? Again, another big money transfer being let go on a free. Played really not very well, to be fair. Very, very average in his time at Galatasaray. Really not doing much, which is a bit of a worry considering he's an attacking midfielder and a striker. Meant to be getting goals and assists, but barely getting any of them. So I failed to see what they see in him, because he didn't do very well before either, stat-wise, and he'd let him go on a free to Lille. So, interesting. 39-40 season, 54 million being sent by Real Madrid this time to get a player from Besiktas on Dennis Corford. Is he any good? That's the question. Stat-wise, the last 2 seasons at Real Madrid, you could say yes. Average rating's been very, very good. Obviously, he's a goalkeeper, so we have to look at this and see, if he's conceding less goals than he's playing. And to be fair, every season he's conceding less than he's actually played, which is obviously a sign of a very, very good goalkeeper. So I think Besiktas were probably right in accepting £69 million for him. I think that was quite a good deal for them. The biggest transfer coming in that season there was £31 million for Frank Zimmerman from Bayern to Besiktas. Still at Besiktas. How's he done there? Average enough. 40-41 season, the biggest transfer was actually a measly 25 million right to 35 million for this guy going from Besiktas to Başakşehir. Is he any good? He's still at Başakşehir, and he's played fairly well actually since being there. 13 goals in that season for a striker it's not the best return really. If you look at that, 19 in the whole season, considering the money they spent on him, I would have expected a better return than that. And this season, 12 games, 1 played so far, really, really not that good. And then the season we have just had, Mohamed Ouaez moved to Atletico Madrid from Karabükspor for 42 million, rising to 61 million. Is he any good? His stats look alright, to be fair, for a right-sided winger. And he seems to have done pretty well in these past 2 seasons already. He hasn't played too much, hasn't been exposed to too much football, but which does surprise me. They're spending £51 million on a player. You'd expect him to play every single game, but he hasn't. But at least this season so far, 7.8. That looks like a pretty decent return, I think. So we're going to look at the Euro Cup now, or the Europa League, and we're going to go from the second knockout round now to just sort of get through it slightly quicker. We're in the 20-30-31 season now. In this first season, Besiktas get knocked out by Sporting, but Fenerbahce go through and beat Malaga 5-0 on aggregate. So that's a pretty good result for them. Quarter-finals now. Where are they? Fenerbahce are there. They beat Olympiacos 4-0 on the day, 5-2 on aggregate. So that's a good result for them as well, which puts them into the semi-finals where they managed to beat Sporting. They win 4-1 aggregate. There's some big wins, to be fair. They're really thrashing these teams in the Europa League. So they set up a Tottenham final. Who's going to win the final? Fenerbahce win on penalties. Fantastic stuff. Another Turkish side winning the Europa League. Really, really good performance out from Fenerbahce. Win on penalties. Beat Tottenham. All the Fenerbahce fans are going to be delighted, I think. Unfortunately, though, the 31-32 season, we're not going to see any improvement on that or anything like that. Fenerbahce lose in the second round to Liverpool 5-2 on aggregate, and Karabükspor lose 1-0 to Schalke. Agonisingly close to that by looks of things, but Schalke just coming out on top there, winning 1-0. So unfortunate season for Turkish football. The year afterwards, though, only Başakşehir are there. They lose to PSV. They lose 2-1 on aggregate, after a 1-0 draw in that second leg there. So another poor year for Turkish football in the Europa League. 33-34 season, though, Besiktas lose to Leverkusen 5-0 on aggregate. Karabükspor lose 4-2 to Wolfsburg, but Bursaspor do manage to get through. They beat Dynamo Kiev 5-2 on aggregate. So we're going to the quarter-finals then, where we come up against Olympiacos, but unfortunately lose 1-0 there. So a tight game once again, but unfortunately the Turkish side coming out worse off there in that sort of situation. So go back to that second knockout round, go to the 34-35 season now. Başakşehir there, they lose to Everton on away goals, so that's always a terrible way to go. Galatasaray lose to Napoli 3-2 on aggregate, and they're the 2 Turkish sides that are there actually. So again, no teams progressing further than the second knockout round. 35-36 season, Başakşehir the only team there, and they lose to Anderlecht 3-2 on aggregate. After having a 2-1 win in that first leg, they lose 2-0 in the second leg to get knocked out, so that's not a good move for them. 36-37, Besiktas are there, and they're the only team there once again, which is starting to annoy me now. I thought these teams would be getting into the quarters and semi-finals a lot more regularly, but they lose to Schalke 3-2 on aggregate, so not the best performance from them. 37-38, Başakşehir then lose to Lazio 4-1 on aggregate, but finally someone that gets through to quarterfinals for a long time. Galatasaray this time beating Leverkusen 2-1 on aggregate after coming down from a 1-0 deficit actually, which is pretty decent. The quarterfinals then, they beat Valencia. That's good going as well. They beat Valencia 3-1 on aggregate, despite losing the second leg 1-0. They did enough in that first leg to progress further. Semi-final, they beat Arsenal 3-2 on aggregate again, losing the second leg, but scoring enough goals in that first leg to overcome the second leg. So they set up a final with Napoli. Who is going to win it? Napoli 1-0, unfortunately. But finally, another team getting to the final. That's good as well. That's some good going. I would have expected a few more teams to have got into semi-finals and finals at this stage of the experiment, but it's not happened for one reason or the other. But Galatasaray are getting there now, and they can't manage to win another one. They won it in the 80s, I think, 1980s maybe, or was it 1990s? They won it a long time ago either way, but they couldn't seem to replicate it in the 2037-38 season. 2038-39 season, that is the first time a Turkish side hasn't got to the second knockout round of the Euro Cup for an awful long time. There's no Turkish sides there, which is disappointing. 39-40 season, Galatasaray there once again, but lose 4-0 to Chelsea on overall aggregate score there. Again, not the best result there, only the one Turkish side being there. And then the 41-40 or the 40-41 season there, Galatasaray there once again, but this time they beat CSK Moscow 3-0. So at least another team going through to the quarterfinals. They beat Marseille, so they win 4-0 aggregate against Marseille. Had they got another chance of reaching a final? Their semi-finals, they lose to Everton, unfortunately. They lose 3-2 on aggregate. Who wins in the final? The Everton and Man United. Man United, obviously. And then in the season, we've just had two Turkish sides there. Başakşehir lose to Leverkusen 5-2 on aggregate, but Besiktas do manage to get through. They beat Valencia 5-1 on aggregate to go into the quarterfinals, where unfortunately they lose to Red Bull Salzburg. So that's the end of the Euro Cup little run there that we've had from these teams. We've had one winner in Fenerbahce and another finalist in Galatasaray. Other than that, it's been a bit underwhelming actually. No one really doing great, which I thought we would see. I thought we'd see a few more winners, but for whatever reason, we haven't. Right, going into the 30-31 season then for the Champions League. Now, this has got a lot more interesting. We want to try and see a few more teams try and break into the quarterfinals and semi-finals here. I don't think any Turkish side are going to win it, considering hardly any won the Europa League, but it'd be nice to see some teams get into the semi-finals and things. Galatasaray in this first season then lose 6-1 to Real Madrid on aggregate. Obviously, a bit of a thump in there, but at least they're getting there to the first knockout round. Season afterwards, Besiktas are there this time, but they lose 2-0, or 3-0 actually on aggregate to Real Madrid that time round. In the 32-33, there's two Turkish sides there, which is good. Unfortunately, though, they both lose. Fenerbahce 4-1 to Juventus and Besiktas 4-0 to Liverpool that season, so not the best results for them. 33-34 season, though, Fenerbahce lose to Chelsea 4-1, but Galatasaray beat Manchester United 4-2 on aggregate. That's really, really good, that is. So they go into the quarterfinals, where they lose to the other Manchester side, Man City 5-1 on aggregate. 34-35, one Turkish side there, Fenerbahce. They beat Real Madrid in the first knockout round, winning 3-2 on aggregate, winning that first leg 3-0, losing the second leg 2-0, but did enough in the first leg, obviously. So we go into the quarterfinals, if I can find where I'm trying to click. Quarterfinals then, they come against Atletico Madrid, the other Madrid side, and this time they lose 3-1 on aggregate, so not the best result for them. They would have liked to have done better, but quarterfinals again is a pretty good going for them. 35-36, Besiktas are the only team there, and they lose 3-0 to Juventus after a goalless draw in that first leg, lose the second leg 3-0, so unfortunate stuff there for Besiktas. The season afterwards, Fenerbahce there once again, but they lose this time 2-1 on aggregate to Manchester United after winning the first leg 1-0. It's nice to see some consistency though, all these Turkish sides being consistent enough to actually get into the first knockout round. Season afterwards, Besiktas there once again, but lose 3-2 to Atletico. Really, really unlucky there. 38-39 season, two Turkish sides there. Fenerbahce lose 6-0 on aggregate to Atletico Madrid, but Galatasaray get through to the quarterfinals again by beating Leverkusen 2-1 on aggregate. Fantastic stuff there. Into the quarterfinals they go, and they beat Bayern Munich on away goals. That's a good result, to be fair to them. Beating Bayern Munich on away goals is no easy feat. So they go into the semi-finals, and they lose to PSG 6-0. But that is the furthest we've seen a Turkish side go in any European competitions. The semi-finals of the Champions League. That is fantastic stuff for Galatasaray. Following on from that season, the 39-40 season, Besiktas are there, but they lose to Barcelona 5-0 on aggregate. The 40-41 season, Fenerbahce are there again, but they lose to Benfica on away goals this time. So sometimes it works for you, sometimes it doesn't. They won the second leg though, but unfortunately that 1-0 in the first leg was just enough for Benfica to get that away goal to go through. And then the season we have just had is the first season in this whole thing. I think it's the first season we've had in the whole experiment, on this part of the experiment at least, where there's no Turkish sides in that first knockout round. So there we go, that is it for the Turkish experiment. We're going to move to a different country next time out. So that will come to you on the weekend. I think that will come later on this week on the weekend. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and I will see you next time for some more Billionaire Experiments.